Hey everyone, welcome to a video that'll probably come as a bit of a surprise. In case you hadn't noticed, and I'll forgive if you hadn't noticed, I ended up deleting my Twitter about 24 hours ago, but by the time you all see this, around probably 2 days ago. And before I deleted it, I left a sort of farewell message to Twitter, kind of hinting a little bit at why I deleted my Twitter and stuff like that. But of course, it's Twitter, so I couldn't really give a whole sort of explanation, which is very funny and ironic, about why I was deleting my Twitter. As we get further in the video, you'll find why that's really funny and ironic. But yeah, so I couldn't fully explain why I was deleting my Twitter, so I just kind of left a little message there. And of course, people were curious and taken by surprise. Honestly, a lot of people were like, "What the hell?" Some people were actually concerned about my well-being and stuff like that, because I did have a pretty large Twitter account. All things considered, I'm not saying I had like a massive Twitter account, but I had around 650, 630, something like that, followers and stuff. Which again, in the world of the Twitterverse, that isn't that big, but in shmups, that's, it's pretty significant following. It's hard. It took me 2.5 years or so to build it up. So people were probably like, "What the hell? What is going on here?" So I'm making this video to explain why I deleted my Twitter and to give my overall thoughts on Twitter itself and why I do not like it as a platform, and mostly why I decided to stop using it and to never return to it. And hopefully, if you're kind of on the fence, if you're kind of in a similar sort of mindset as me, or in a similar situation where you feel like maybe this platform is doing more harm than good, maybe this video can be helpful to you. So the first thing I want to do is just talk a little bit about my history with social media itself and why I created my Twitter account. So in case I've mentioned this in a few podcasts, I think, and stuff like that, but before the Electric Underground podcast and before making my account on the farm and my account on SoundCloud and all that stuff, I actually did not use social media at all. In my personal life, I've never used social media. Of course, I was aware of it, and when I was a teenager, I had a MySpace page for literally like a week or two, but then I ended up deleting it. But in my life, I've chosen not to participate in social media at all. Yeah, I guess, is that old school or not? I don't know, but even though I was very well aware of it, many of my peers did use it, I never was really comfortable using social media. And so when I got around to creating the podcast, I was like, okay, well, I need to promote this shit, right? This podcast isn't going to promote itself, and it's not like The Farm has this massive promotion scene built into it at the time. So I started looking around, and of course, Twitter was one of the avenues. I thought, okay, we got SoundCloud, which was a mistake to use SoundCloud, I think, but we got SoundCloud, we got The Farm, Shmup Reddit, Twitter, YouTube. And YouTube, for me, I regret I didn't put more focus on YouTube. If I could go back, I would have focused everything on YouTube in the beginning rather than doing this whole Twitter SoundCloud thing that I was doing. And I'll explain why I regret this. So anyway, as I was saying, I created my Twitter account not to really socialize, not to get to know people, none of that stuff. It was to push my content, to be an outlet for me to get my content out there. And I think a lot of people who are whatever, YouTubers or whatever you want to call it, they kind of think of Twitter in that same way too, right? They think of it as a way to promote your stuff, to promote yourself. It's a promotion tool. And I think a lot of people, when I start talking about the negatives of Twitter, which I think many people are aware of, even people who have a big investment in Twitter, they are aware of these negatives. It's hard not to. And there's some other negatives I think that might be a little less obvious. But I think people also greatly overestimate the benefit of Twitter, the promotion ability of Twitter, because it seems like Twitter is a powerful promotion tool, but when you start to really analyze the data, and I did, and I have also followed data beyond just my channel, like peers, other shmuppers, other YouTubers, gaming YouTubers specifically, and even like non-gaming YouTubers, just to kind of see if there's a trend here. And I've noticed there is a definite trend that Twitter is not a very strong promotional tool at all. Usually if you look at a large YouTuber, or a somewhat large YouTuber, their subscriber counts will massively dwarf their YouTube followers typically. Sometimes there's, like, depending on the genre you're in and what you're going for, that might not be the case, right? Like maybe if you're a, I don't know, maybe like a political drama channel or something like that, because I think Twitter is a hotbed for that stuff. I mean, obviously I'm a gaming channel and that shit ends up in my timelines more than gaming content. So I guess if you're going into like a career of being a political pundit or something like that, or because we need more of those, of course, maybe Twitter is the way to go, right? But I think as far as if you're a gaming channel, an artist, I don't know, maybe musician, Twitter might be okay for musicians and stuff like that. But I know at least like YouTubing content, like in the gaming area, I do not think Twitter is very good promotional tool at all. And I found when I followed it, as my YouTube has grown and really started to, at least for what I'm working with, expand a lot more, my Twitter has been pretty flatlined. And what's really frustrating about Twitter is I think the potential is there, like from a technical standpoint, for it to be a very strong promotional tool. It's all there, but the culture and the way it programs you to use it dissuades that behavior greatly. So even though technically it's there, the mentality and design behind Twitter does not really promote or does not really allow content promotion very well. So what am I talking about exactly? And I've mentioned this a little bit before in the past, and some people write this off as maybe me getting, I don't know, a little bit too conspiratorial or whatever it is, but it's also really hard to deny, I think. But so Twitter is, like I said, it's not a place people go to consume content. That's not why people go to Twitter, right? It's like you go to YouTube to consume content. You go to other places and stuff to do that. But Twitter is not the place you do that. You open up Twitter to do what? So for me, I was opening up Twitter, and I'll kind of get into my more personal reasons why I deleted my Twitter, but let's focus on this point first. I was opening up my Twitter probably 10 or 12 times a day, maybe more. Maybe I'm lowballing that. I could have been opening up more. But why? I didn't have 10 or 12 videos to release a day, right? And my justification to myself was, well, for fan interaction, right? Like I could be getting notifications, or I could be kind of keeping an eye on other content I need to promote. And I think while I was on Twitter, I was one of the best people about doing this. Like when I would see content from my peers, like Moglar posted his 500 mil run, or Kiwi posted this run, or Juju Kenobi posted his PB, or that 7-hour video, or his tutorial series, or Game Boy Guru had a new podcast episode. Like I was using Twitter to try and retweet that stuff and promote it. Plasma was also very good about doing this, and Jamers was also pretty good about doing this as well, and Game Boy Guru himself. Yeah, very good about retweeting. But overall, I think it's undeniable that most people did not do this and not view this as a purpose of Twitter. And so when content would come out, not just mine, a lot of shmup content, the retweets were extremely, extremely low, especially when there were like bigger accounts. Like SCG Weekly, I'm pretty sure had a much bigger Twitter following than myself, but their retweets were not that much higher than mine at all when a new episode was coming out and stuff. And that kind of the whole point of Twitter, at least I would think, right? At least when I remember when it was first kind of coming out, the idea was if you were a band and you wanted your fans to know, oh, we're playing in Arkansas, whatever, this month, if you follow them, they can tweet out their shows and their times, and you can get that information, right? I think that was kind of the original idea behind Twitter, I think, right? It was basically a way for organizations and bands and shit like that to connect with their fans directly and a little bit more quickly. But of course, it has evolved much into a much different beast than that over the years. And I don't know, maybe there was more to it originally, but I remember early on in Twitter having a little bit of an interest in it because I could follow my bands a little easier than before, right? But anyway, so people weren't, for sure, people were not using Twitter to retweet content all that much. In fact, I found that if I promoted shit on the Reddit was actually much better. And the Reddit's tiny, right? The Reddit's only like 4,000 people or something like that. I can't remember, but it's not really that big. But the Reddit was actually gaining me more views and more like activity than freaking Twitter was, right? And why is that, right? When you think about all these different shmup people and all the way we're interconnected with each other, we could theoretically expand our content into other branches, right? Like I could make a video and then someone who is a shmupper but also has a following and speedrunning or something could retweet it, and then a speedrunner could see it, and then the speedrunner could retweet that, and right, that's like the idea. And that does happen on Twitter, but it very, very, very rarely happens with content. It can, but it mostly doesn't. So what does get spread on Twitter? What is hot on Twitter? And I'm finding this is very clear. Well, of course, memes spread on Twitter. Sexy pictures spread on Twitter. I mean, why not? I don't really care. But I think also another thing that was very interesting to me is the things that were most shared, most like random, like basically whenever some person I had no idea who they are would show up in my timeline and be like, okay, how did this happen? And usually it was kind of like polling or opinion-oriented content. That is what would really get hotness. So like, what are the top 5 games that are underrated with sexy female leads or something like that, alright? Or like that kind of stuff really got a lot of attention. Or which Final Fantasy is the worst, and they have like polls. And even in my own Twitter, I noticed like whenever I put out polls or put out like survey-ish questions, that is what was definitely the most active. And so I think one use of Twitter that was pretty good was if you wanted to poll people, right? If you wanted to get people to give like statistical polls, I think that's one usage of Twitter that seems pretty legit. But whenever it came to any kind of discussion or any kind of like again, engaging with content, I was finding it was very, very poor. And so why is that? And so I kind of want to explain my feelings on why I feel like Twitter is not a healthy place and not a place I would really recommend people to use as social media. If you want to use it, I mean, I'm not judging or anything, but if you're kind of on the fence about it, I'm hoping that maybe this video could be helpful to you, basically. And so what I was finding is that Twitter was not, like, I was opening my Twitter all the time, and you know the whole like FOMO thing, right? That was definitely a very powerful thing for me. But also, it also kind of felt like, okay, I have this obligation, right? Because I'm a content creator, and I don't want fans tweeting at me and then me not answering them, right? Because that could be sort of disappointing for them, kind of like in my old Discord. But what I was finding is, what was most interesting was not analyzing the behavior of other people, but was analyzing my own behavior over the past years and how Twitter sort of creeped into my consciousness in a very unhealthy way. So basically, Twitter was engaging me in it was basically pushing me into its way of thinking rather than me using it for my own purposes. And I think it's designed to do this. And so I think that's why when people tend to delete Twitters, right? I think one reason why people were concerned about me deleting my Twitter is they felt like, oh, Mark might be having some kind of like mental breakdown, all right? Because that's a very common occasion for why people delete their Twitters. They have some kind of mental breakdown and they delete their Twitter. No, I didn't do that. This was a little bit more calculated. But I think if I continue to use it for, I don't know, a few more years, I don't know, maybe you would get a Mark deleting his Twitter mental breakdown. I could see that coming. So what were the really negative effects of Twitter, and why was I feeling like, okay, I need to move on from this? The first is I was finding it was becoming very, very addictive to where, again, I was opening my Twitter very often. And sometimes I'm not even sure why I was doing it. I would just open it. And then, like, I would have some kind of other purpose in mind. Like, I'd open my computer to maybe start writing something or to, like, work on something. And then I'd just have, like, this little bell that would go off my head. It's like, hey, you better check your Twitter, right? And so I'd go on Twitter, and then I'd, like, type something on there, like, oh, I see someone said something. And then I'd close it, and then I'd, go back to what I was doing. And then 3 minutes later, a bell would go off in my head again and be like, you better check your Twitter to see if they replied. So I check my Twitter, they'll reply, then I'll, the loop, right? We all know this loop. And so, of course, you could say, well, you could argue for some better self-control and things like that, Mark. Like, really, just control yourself. It's not a big deal. But I was finding there were other things that I thought were really an issue with Twitter, and why I think it's specifically an unhealthy social media platform. The one is that I've talked about this in an article. Many people don't really like to think about this or don't really like to agree with it all that much. But the Twitter cast system is very, very real. There's also the YouTube cast system, of course. But the thing about the Twitter cast system that I think is much worse is that, again, YouTube is a platform based around content. I know YouTube's not perfect, but I mean, at the end of the day, that is what it is about, even if sometimes people make kind of garbage content on there for views and they try and game it and all that. Still, at the end of the day, most people on YouTube are there to create content, and most people on YouTube do appreciate well-made content if they take the time to actually open the video and watch it, right? But on Twitter, like I said, content does not matter. Content is not what people are interested in. So basically, if I'm interacting with someone, like, let's say someone tweets something, like the guy from DF Retro, or the guy from, like, My Life in Gaming, or, like, adjacent people to myself, right? And I go ahead and answer them. There's this sort of Twitter cast system that comes into play where, and I know this because I engaged in it myself. I was really trying hard not to, but you can't help it. It's like Twitter is melting this into your brain, and it is very effective at doing this. So what it does is it's basically like an RPG of social hierarchy, where it gives you all these analytics, all these ways to parse out and create this social caste system of course, who has the most followers, but also other stuff like who has the most likes, who has the most retweets, who has the most famous, influential friends, right? Twitter gives you all this information very upfront, kind of like to build up a little social portfolio for you. So for instance, let's say I tweet on a bigger YouTubing gamer's tweets, which happen all the time. I was ignored very, very often, even if I was the only one who replied to that tweet, right? So basically, let's say they tweeted something and there's 3 people that replied. I was one of those 3. My reply would not really get noticed that much. I might get a like if I'm lucky, but yeah, like my reply wouldn't really get noticed. Some other random dude's reply wouldn't really get noticed. But then this other guy replied, and this other guy was like had a larger follower count, probably was a colleague of his of some kind, and he would get some kind of reply interaction, right? And of course, hold on, people, I'm not trying to say, oh, I feel bad, or whatever, but I'm just saying this is a reality of what Twitter is. The reality is that when you approach someone on Twitter, the first thing they're going to do, and I know because I did this, the first thing they do is they click on you and look at how many followers do they have, and then your brain sort of puts them in a little mental category of like, oh, they have 3,000 Twitter followers. I have 600 Twitter followers. This person is important. And then another person would approach you. They have 5 followers. And your brain goes, 5? Okay, this person's not that important. And you can say, no, I don't do that. But you do. I know you do, because I was doing it, and I was trying not to do it. Like I said, it's like in your brain, because everyone does that to you, right? So when people are doing that to you constantly, all the time, whatever, like placing you in casts, as a social animal, you are just you begin to accept this, and then you begin to adopt this into your own behavior. So I would get people who would, reply to me, and I just started making a policy like, okay, I'm going to reply to everyone at the same rate with the same amount, unless they're being assholes, right? It doesn't matter to their followers. Now I would start to even try and not look at their followers, but it's so damn tempting to look like, okay, how many followers does this person have, right? How influential is this person? Especially if they're approaching you for like a collaboration or to do something or whatever. It's like, yeah. And I was noticing too, I have some confirmation of this in my early days of Twitter. People in the shmup scene that I knew from the farm, right? Like the familiar faces you all know, right? I don't need to shout them out again, but the shmup homies, of course, they were really cool and really, they were cool enough to work with me when I was a nobody, right? Which is very unusual, so shout outs to the shmup scene for that. But many people who were sort of tangential retro gaming people or tangential gaming YouTubers, nah, they didn't want anything to do with me, right? Despite I felt like even on my kind of like my Zero Ranger interview, I thought was really good, and I was like, okay, this is solid content. And I naively thought after I did that interview, okay, so when I approach people, what I'm going to do is I'm going to approach them and then link that podcast episode to show them, okay, like as a little resume, right? Like, okay, look, I can do quality work. I would be great to work with. This is a great podcast. I think it's really well done. You think people were actually checking out that podcast episode? Of course not. Did that matter how good that podcast episode was? Of course not. What mattered was how many viewers or followers I had, right? And that podcast episode didn't have that many followers or views, and I didn't have that many followers. So they could just go wipe next, right? And that is the system of Twitter. And I found myself in the past few months, I was really struggling to get out of that mindset of, okay, people are people. They're not, like, for instance, someone with a smaller follower count could actually just be like really talented and really good. And really all that your follower count is how much you have invested in Twitter, right? That's all it indicates. It does not indicate quality. It does not indicate charisma. It does not indicate talent. It indicates none of this. All Twitter followers indicate, it's like an RPG, right? It's like World of Warcraft. All it indicates is how much time have you spent on Twitter and how agreeable are you to the Twitter model of social interaction. And so this is another point I wanted to talk about was Twitter is training you to communicate and to participate with others in a very specific way. So for instance, when I would tweet things that I felt were pretty interesting, pretty artistically even like complex, or videos and stuff like that, of course that stuff went absolutely nowhere. It had no response because it's in the environment of Twitter. Twitter is all about instant accessibility and breaking through noise, right? Like, I didn't have all that many, like, I didn't follow all that many people, but I did follow quite a few. And my Twitter was just a jumble of madness. Another reason why I felt like I was getting frustrated with Twitter, because Plasma would tweet some stuff that was actually important. Because I had this massive jumble of stuff, I would just straight up miss it. And so there's like WTN replays I'm missing and shit like that, because I was in just this massive jumble of stuff. And so what's crazy is that when you're using Twitter a lot, you can start to feel like, okay, the amount of shit I can post and content I can promote is limited, right? If I go ahead and start posting and retweeting lots of people's content, people who follow me are going to be annoyed, right? It's kind of like in Discord, where even if you announce something cool, everyone instantly just does that like annoyed ping face, because there's this sort of social thing now where you can't ping people because, you know, that's beneath them, even if you're like giving free shit away or whatever. So, or like something actually important comes up. It's like, okay, the whole point of this server is live shmup events and promoting shmup. So you guys are getting annoyed about me like pinging you about a historic shmup event between the Japanese and English Western scenes that's never happened before. It's like, okay, what the fuck, right? And I feel like with Twitter, it's kind of like that too, where the important stuff just gets buried in with all this noise and nonsense and stuff like that. But at the same time, what's getting promoted, what's getting pushed is not content, right? It's usually just opinions, flame threads, right? Whatever it is. Like, that stuff's what's hot on Twitter. And so overall, I was finding it very, very ineffective as far as promoting content and sharing content. And also I was finding people are so stingy with those retweets, right? But if you think about it, as a shmup player on Twitter, you would think your duty would be to get on there and just retweet all the content, right? Like, that's the way to be the most effective on Twitter. Like, if we thought about, okay, let's promote shmups and get them out there, every shmup player should just sit around on Twitter, ignore like 80% of all the like whatever memes and shit like that, and just retweet content all day long. So like Jamer's new replay comes out, we all retweet it. I release a podcast episode, we all retweet it. Game Boy Guru releases something, we all tweet it, right? Like SCG Weekly, so on and so forth, right? That would be theoretically what you would be doing on Twitter. Of course, that's not how it works, right? Because Twitter's, again, not a platform for content sharing. It's a platform for... Okay, so let me get to my next point here of why I think Twitter is a little bit risky to use as a content creator, and I wouldn't really recommend using it as a promotion platform. And the reason why is, like I said, Twitter is very good about sort of hijacking your social thinking, right? Again, so it's making you kind of participate in this social caste system. But I also noticed Twitter has a real good way to create beef with people. And what do I mean by that? Well, Twitter, there is no option for basically not participating in Twitter. And if you think there is, maybe depends on what you're doing on Twitter, but if you're a content maker, right, like a YouTuber and stuff like that, it's actually much harder to not be part of shit that you don't want to be part of on Twitter, because there's this weird sort of like a social situation going on with Twitter. So let me give you an example of what I mean. So let's say for instance, I created a Melee video, right? And I thought, okay, let me share this with some Melee people. And so I add them to the Twitter. I knew that it was unlikely it would get retweeted or looked at or stuff like that, but I was like, well, let's give it a shot, right? So you give it a shot, you put it out there, and they ignore it, and a part of you is kind of like, okay, like there's that little bit of disappointment there, right? And so even when you put out, what's interesting about basically what I'm getting at with Twitter, it's not what you're saying only, it's also what you're not saying that becomes a part of Twitter, right? Like, let's say you put out a statement, you know exactly who retweets that, you know exactly who liked that. So let's say you put out something that is sort of directed in a certain direction or something like that, or is like making some kind of like larger point, and then you look and you see, oh, this player retweeted this, oh, this player liked this, oh, this player, but this player didn't. This person didn't, right? You can see who didn't respond, basically is what I'm saying. And so this is another thing that makes me very uncomfortable about managing my Twitter, because it's a constant, right? It's a constant decision-making process every day of, okay, Game Boy Guru released an episode. Do I retweet this? Do I not retweet this? And I think, well, I should retweet it because I want his content to get seen more. Then part of my brain's like, well, there's also this principle within Twitter where you can't tweet too much stuff because people will just ignore it or whatever. They even get mad at you and mute you, right? If you tweet so much. So there's like this constant min-maxing your brain is doing, and I think other shmup players are doing this as well with content and stuff like that. It's like, okay, do I retweet this? Do I not retweet this? Whereas on other platforms like YouTube, YouTube's gonna post your shit, right? It's gonna post it. Whether or not, like, there's some like ghost stuff they do sometimes where they don't allow that, but you could, if you wanted, you could flood your entire, subscription box with like 50 videos at once. You may annoy your followers enough for them to unsubscribe if it's just a bunch of garbage. But at the same time, like, I did this with the Shmup Mania runs, right? I released a bunch of Shmup Mania runs. I still gotta release more, or with Shmup Slam, I released a bunch of runs kind of in a window there, and they're all out there, they're all promoted. But on Twitter, I couldn't retweet every single one of those runs, right? I couldn't do that because of this whole sort of environment within Twitter. And so another thing that I was having a lot of trouble with on Twitter was, again, sort of the addictive quality of it. This was kind of another reason why I decided not to participate in Twitter, because it was getting very, very addictive, but I wasn't sure why. And then it was also sort of reprogramming how my brain was thinking, like what I was thinking. Like, basically, I was starting to kind of key into what Twitter wanted me to do. And so I would literally like be doing something and my brain would go, a bell would go off in my brain, and be like, oh, this would be a good tweet. Oh, I should tweet about this. Oh, this should be a tweet. Oh, this could be a tweet. And so it was like hijacking a lot of my time thinking about, oh, this could be a tweet. Let me do this. Let me do that, right? And it was taking me away from the larger purpose of my content. In fact, over the past few days, I've been having like Twitter withdrawals, basically, where I'll be doing something and I'll grab my phone. Like, whoa. And so Twitter definitely forms a habit. I think we all know this. But let me get to my final point here before I close out the video, because this is a long video. I don't want to go on too long. But my final point is, I think if you are using Twitter for business purposes, like myself, like promoting content, I strongly advise you to double check whether or not this is a good way to proceed, because of my final kind of nail in the coffin with Twitter was, I think Twitter is bypassing a lot of your, I don't know what, filters, right? It's bypassing a lot of shit, and it's creating these it makes you impulse messages, what I'm saying. Like, what Twitter is really good at is providing instant attention, and it kind of trains your brain to expect instant attention for things, like instant attention for thoughts and stuff like that. And then it compounds on itself and it gets extremely addictive, right? Where you have a thought, you're like, oh, that's a funny thought, post it, you get likes, you feel good. 5 minutes later, your brain's like, I got another funny thought, let's do it. And so you start just short-circuiting many of your things. And so when you look at the environment of Twitter and stuff like that, I don't think it's a coincidence that many people's careers are getting ripped to shreds on Twitter. That all these, right, like people say something they shouldn't say, or say something that's controversial on Twitter. And of course there's the whole Twitter hate mobs and stuff. And maybe, this is getting a little bit long, but maybe at some point I'll talk about why I think those mobs exist, because I think it's not just the political world. I think a lot of it is how Twitter is structured, that Twitter fosters this sort of behavior. Twitter itself is creating this, because there are mobs on the internet, right? Like if you go into a Discord, I have been mobbed on a Discord. The difference is that you can't, if you get mobbed on a Discord, what usually happens is you're going to their Discord. Like I show up in the link to the past Discord, right? And I'm arguing with them about run ahead, and I'm getting mobbed, but I'm on their home territory, right? Whereas my Discord, I'm not going to get mobbed by my own Discord because I can moderate and ban it, right? For one thing. And also, Twitter doesn't have any sort of moderation. You can block people and stuff like that, but it's not the same thing, because you're surrounded on all sides. So you can block people all you want, but that doesn't prevent the environment around you from still circling and attacking you, right? You're just not seeing it, right? Whenever there's controversies, right, people will will turn out like pro Jared or whoever it is, right? They'll turn off their Twitter and stuff like that to kind of like shut down the noise on their end. But even with them gone, there's all kinds of madness breaking out and spreading all across Twitter and all that kind of stuff. And I think a lot of that is by design. Twitter's designed to do this. It's designed, why, I think? Because I think Twitter is designed to get you to engage with it as much as possible, and that kind of stuff is very appealing. And again, it's a place where you feel instant gratification. So we love that kind of stuff. So if you want to feel like something's happening, and that FOMO, like there's a lot of factors here compounding. And so why I don't think Twitter is the best place for a professional running of your stuff, I'll tell you exactly why. Because there's been other schmuppers who I think got caught up in the environment of Twitter, and I basically lost all professional respect for them. And I think this happens to a lot of people on Twitter, right? Where the immediate thought comes to them like, oh shit, I want to say this now. And so they type it out and they send it to you, right? And if there's all kinds of noise and people dogpiling on top of you at the time, they feel like they can slip in, right? But in the long run, that shit is forever. So, for you, it was like it was an impulse and then you move on. But for me, I remember that shit forever. And that's kind of how Twitter is, where it's taking these impulsive thoughts, it's short-circuiting any sort of filtering, and then it's making it permanent. So it makes you appear, I think, it honestly makes you appear a worse person than you actually are. And I think people are very judgmental of each other on Twitter too, because everything is so black and white, everything feels so permanent, and we all feel like it's methodical. But when we think about it, a lot of the shit that's said on Twitter is just like this immediate thought that's probably not even fully formed. It's just like an emotional thought that appears to you, like a moment like, oh, this is funny, let me write this. But this, as we've seen many times, this has come to bite many people in the ass, right? And harm their careers or harm their work greatly. Now, I think on my Twitter, I've been able to avoid doing this, but I could see myself over the next few years, if I continued on Twitter, one day Mark gets emotional, Mark gets mad, I start saying some wild shit or something. Because I can talk some shit sometimes, right? And boom, career over, baby. I don't know what it would be. And also, like, the environment of Twitter is also very interesting too, where this is why I am deleting my Twitter too. I don't think there's anything on there that's necessarily concerning. It's more of like a statement. But I think also the goalposts are shifting, right? And they will continue to shift. And I think there's also this new trend of people use Twitter as a weapon now, right? Where they don't like you, what are they going to do? They're going to dig through your Twitter and they're going to find something to use against you. And so let's say I continue on with my Twitter career. I get an argument with some dude who's being a douche to me or something like that. And it gets heated and I look bad, or I don't know, like I say something that makes me look bad. At the time, it's like, well, it's no big deal, whatever. We all move on with our lives. 4 years later, my channel's maybe doing more successful. I'm doing more successful. And the goalposts have shifted, right, in the social environment to where what I said 4 years ago at the time was like kind of rude. Now it's like a big deal, right? Now I was proto-millennial shaming him or some crazy shit, right? And so then, and I think Twitter too, the environment is going to continue to get worse and worse, I personally think. And the reason why is because it's designed to get worse. It's designed to become more and more extreme, more and more intense. And also, the longer you're on Twitter, the more invested you are within it, because it puts you through the ringer with getting all these views, you're putting thousands, you're grinding away, man. It's like the EverQuest of social media, right? You are grinding away for those followers. You are grinding away for that influence. And so no matter how wild shit gets on Twitter, no matter how much everyone says, oh, I don't like Twitter, Twitter's bad, you're not going to leave it because you have that sunken investment in it. That's why I'm getting out now, because I don't want to get, 15K followers deep into Twitter and then realize, oh shit, this stuff is getting out of hand, or you know what I mean? And also, so I have two final examples I want to talk about that I think are a really good encapsulation of what I'm talking about, and why I think if you are a content creator, you might be wiser just to leave Twitter. One, of course, I guess I'll go over my summary and then the final thoughts. One, Twitter is not actually that good at promoting content anyway. You might be just wasting your time, even without the negatives, right? It's not that good about promoting content. People don't give a shit about your content. It's just noise. Two, is that Twitter is putting you in a weird situation to where it can't be just about your content, right? Maybe if you somehow establish some kind of like robotic presence on Twitter to where a bot automatically tweets your shit and stuff like that. But at the same time, it's like a massive global comment section. So even if you just had a bot that tweeted your videos, let's say one of your videos has something controversial in it, and then someone like takes issue with it. The thing is that in a comment section on YouTube, if there's a lot of heat on your comment section, right? There's some sort of like, it can be contained in some sort of way, right? You can like get in there, you can moderate it, you can kind of like add shit to your video, like there's stuff you can do right in there. But on Twitter, it's like a comment section that's also like the world, right? So it can grow and grow and grow and grow, like to where it's way larger than just that one video. And so again, so even just having a robotic presence on Twitter, I think is pretty risky, because there's no moderation. You don't know what's going to happen to your content on Twitter, right? It could get totally ripped up and taken out of context and all kinds of crazy shit. And three, I think Twitter hijacks that part of your brain that wants to promote, the part of the brain that wants to grow. It hijacks it, and it starts putting its own sort of flaws in you, right? It makes you participate in this caste system, even if you don't want to. It kind of forces you to where you start to look up to other content creators who have more Twitter followers, who could literally suck. They could be like shit content creators, and you could be way better than them. But that doesn't matter, right? It's all about the followers. Nothing else matters. It's just about the followers. And as I've also noted, good content does not equal followers, right? Investment in Twitter's systems, time in Twitter is what gets you more followers, right? For the most part. And then my final point here is the dogpiling thing, right? And then of course the risk stuff. So let me give how your fan base, basically what I'm saying is Twitter can turn your fan base against you at a very rapid pace, much, much larger than a YouTube comment section or something like that. And the reason for it, I don't know, but so two examples. One was of a different YouTuber and one is of myself. So the first one is of a YouTuber, Resonant Arc, where they had a podcast episode, and that's the saying, the goalposts can move, right? Because what they said was completely the most benign shit I have ever heard. They were talking about some re-release of some RPG. They're an RPG channel, and the main guy behind the channel, Resonant Arc, isn't really that big of an anime fan, apparently. Like he doesn't hate it, but he's not all that into it. And so they're taking some like 90s RPG and they're giving it this sort of like, modern anime aesthetic, right? Where it's more like cutesy and whatever. And he mentioned that he felt that the new aesthetic looked cheap. And that's what he said. That's all he said. And it turned into like this massive controversy among his fans, and he got all this backlash, people ripping him up like he's saying the Beatles are bigger than Jesus or some shit over a comment that small. Like, it snowballed and snowballed and snowballed into now he hates anime. Oh, now he looks down on anime fans. Oh, now he thinks he's better than everyone else. Like, now he's being like, and then he had to like come on the podcast and issue some sort of apology to his fans and shit. And I was like, whoa, this is absolutely fucking ridiculous. For one, he's being a critic. And for two, he was right. It did look cheap. So, like, that wasn't even part of the conversation. So, anyway. So, that's example one of absolute bullshit that can happen on Twitter. Number two happened to me. And it annoys me to this day. Because, so, of course, it's with freaking, those damn switch ports of the Psycho games. I cannot get away from those freaking things. So, of course, if you guys have been following me and read my articles, I had a low opinion of them before I was even hired to review them. So then I was hired to review them, basically, where it was like Psycho, Shooting Stars, Alpha, and Bravo, right? And of course I gave them bad reviews because they're shitty ports. They have a ton of input lag. They have no accessibility features. They're just a whole huge disservice to these games, to these Psycho games. And I got this massive backlash on Twitter, and I had this other YouTuber, Switch YouTuber, whatever, shmups on Switch, calling me out, saying I'm arrogant, and like people were dogpiling the shit out of me. And it's like, and then it turned out, of course I was right. Of course I was right. To the point where the developer, when they brought it to Steam, issued a statement saying, we're going to improve the input lag, which they did for the most part. It's still 4 frames. It's not great, but it's definitely better than like 7 frames or some shit like that on the Switch. Yeah, so they improved. So the developer themselves actually confirmed, yeah, this is an issue and we're going to try and fix this when it comes to Steam. Did I get any sort of apology? Did the mob come and unmob me and be like, okay, we're sorry. You know, we were wrong, Mark. I'm pretty sure, too, I am not going to be writing reviews for Nintendo Life anymore because shortly after that, I have not been asked to do any more reviews for Nintendo Life. Perhaps it's a coincidence, we'll see, but I'm kind of getting the feeling, nope, I think my review generated too much heat to come back to do any more reviews. Maybe, I mean, you never know. But I just noticed I haven't gotten a review for that, a commission for a review from them for a while, and yeah, and other people have written some shmup reviews. I'm like, okay, I think I'm fired. But, and I think, you know, they look at this unjust Twitter mob that came after me, and now I'm not writing reviews for Nintendo Life anymore. I'm just saying, maybe it's a coincidence, maybe it's not, but, and it's not like, of course I was right, but is there any sort of like justice as far as these people taking back what they said? Of course not, because it was just this heated moment of, oh, let's beat on Mark for a bit because we think we're all smart, because I was the only reviewer who dared to give that stupid collection a bad score, which it deserved. And instead of being applauded, being like, okay, someone's actually holding some integrity here, you know, everyone's just like, well, you should give it a 7 out of 10 because everyone else did, or whatever. 8 out of 10, which, no. Over my dead body will I give that collection an 8 out of 10. So, anyway. So in summary, these are the reasons why I've deleted my Twitter and why I am not going to resume using Twitter, because I think, and why I have deleted it permanently, because I think that Twitter is a waste of time, doesn't promote your stuff. I think that it is used more now as sort of a weapon against people rather than a legitimate form of communication, to be honest. And also, I think Twitter intentionally creates this environment, which I think is pretty unethical. And it's funny because Twitter goes out of its way to prevent discourse and to prevent good communication. I definitely think this is intentional of Twitter to do this, right? For instance, I wanted to kind of give a little bit of a more in-depth explanation of why I was leaving Twitter in my farewell tweet, but I couldn't because having this whole like Twitter chain bullshit is impossible to follow, and most people didn't even see the second part of my tweet because you never do, right? And whenever you try and have discussions on Twitter, you're like missing tweets or missing communications. Like, it's intentionally, they could just bar it into one thing, right? They could remove the ridiculous character limit and all that stuff, but it's all, I think, designed to be that way intentionally, to create this environment of now, like very just upfront pigeon language rather than anything articulate or like exchanging of ideas stuff. It's basically made so we can shout at each other. So anyway, thanks so much for tuning in, and I don't know, I'll thank my patrons, so peace. So thank you to Dingo, Anthony A, Ben Wynn, Brian Shiver, Dunpeel 2064, EC2151, Eric H, Full Set, Retro Schmupper, Gus, Kiwi, Joe Angelo, John, Gameboy Guru, Kay, Quentin, Malaise, Mark Sloan, Martin Worrell, and let me know if I say that incorrectly, Martin, Maz, Meher Calendrian, Nathaniel Davis, and Electron, Okla Ghouls, Parlar, Rhizosis, Smacky Factor, Sugumo, Turopan, Young Money Sui, Plasmo, and Yuzakaya. Thanks for watching.